And so Paul goes to Jerusalem. And he goes to Jerusalem because I can't say because. I can tell you what he did when we got there. But in Jerusalem, Paul is definitely defending the gospel, the pure gospel, the true gospel, the gospel that he says he received in the first chapter of this letter. Is that all right? God led Paul after 14 years back to Jerusalem. Paul says he got a revelation. And he went to Jerusalem in response to that revelation. Is that what he says? The trip wasn't a man-planned journey. The trip was a God-called journey. Paul was at the time of his life, he had understood going where God called him to go, to do what God called him to do. Amen? Amen? See, one of the things that this is a me thing. One of the things I fight against is one-verse theology, where people take one verse and they build a whole theology around one verse. And one of the things that one-verse theologians use is what I call the yeah, but method. And that's because when you present something other than one of their one verses, yeah, but. Amen? Because Paul went to Jerusalem. Why? God sent him there. Paul did what he did in Jerusalem. Why? Because God gave him that work to do. Amen? And so many times we have these wonderful Christians who say they're spirit-filled and they're God-led, God ordered my steps, God directed me, God called me, God tell me. And then when a work is presented, we get the yeah, but method. Amen? Amen? Paul could have easily said, after 14 years, yeah, but I have my itinerary planned out. I'm going this way, God. Jerusalem's going to take me off of what I had planned. I got other places that need to hear the gospel for the first time. Jerusalem has the gospel. I need you to go to Jerusalem. Yeah, but they got Peter's there. James is there. He could have sent a message, say, hey, y'all tell the people what God told me to tell the people. Amen? But the trip wasn't planned by Paul. Paul just accepted the itinerary set for him by God. Is that all right? Is that all right? Paul went to Jerusalem because there is a work of the gospel that is worldwide. There's a worldwide mission of the gospel. And that if people are, remember you added the drink mix to the water? If people are adding to the gospel, then that's going to interfere with the worldwide mission of the gospel. And there were those in the church, who were pressing the necessity of rituals, of rules for salvation, of ceremony. Yeah? Yeah? Circumcision. People in the church who are pressing the necessity of circumcision. People in the church who are pressing the necessity of following the law of Moses. People in the church who are pressing the necessity of following all the rites and traditions and ceremonies under of the Judaistic Jewish religion. Amen? And Paul knew something. I'm thinking this may have been the revelation that he received. Paul knew that if people were allowed to add ritual, if people were allowed to add rules, if people were allowed to add ceremony, if people were allowed to add extras to the gospel, then he and his ministry would have been in vain. Would have been fruitless. He says that he went and he spoke to the leaders so that his ministry would not be proven to have been in vain, so that his run would not have been in vain. Amen? Amen? Every person who had trusted in Jesus Christ, and every person who would from that point on trust in Jesus Christ for salvation would have to then undergo the ritual that some people were saying is necessary. 14 years he's been teaching the gospel that will be undermined by the teaching of an alternative gospel. Is that all right? Is that all right? Every person who had trusted in Jesus Christ and every person who would trust in Jesus Christ would have to focus their lives upon the law of Moses instead of focusing their lives on Jesus Christ. Amen? Amen? This is the reason that God led Paul to Jerusalem after 14 years. After 14 years. Because there was something in Jerusalem that needed to be addressed by this man because God called him for this work. Is that all right? This was the reason God led Paul to Jerusalem to address and to save the message and the work of the true gospel. To try to keep the message and the work of the true gospel pure to the true gospel. Is that all right? Just imagine, Paul is the minister to the Gentiles. And imagine the thousands of Gentile believers who had been led to the Lord through the gospel that Paul preached, and all of the churches that had already been established by the message that Paul preached, through the gospel that Paul preached, and the other people who preached the gospel that Paul preached throughout the world. All of these churches established, all of these Christians converted. Just imagine the devastation upon these believers, upon these churches, if they had to return to their conversion experience and add a ritual and add rules and add traditions and ceremonies that have nothing to do with the purity of the gospel that they believe has saved them from condemnation. Some of these people have been in it a couple of months. Some of these people have been in it 14 years. Amen? Amen? As ministers, we cannot run in vain. We cannot run fruitlessly. Amen? Which is why the purity of the gospel has to be maintained, because if we preach that crystal light mixed gospel, we are not going to be able to produce the fruit that is produced by those who are connected to the vine of Christ. Because we only produce the fruit from the nourishment that He provides. And if we start trying to add to it, that's going to be something else. Amen? You ever have a seedless watermelon? Tastes delicious. Some things are stereotypes, some things are just true. We love it. Amen? But you know, although a seedless watermelon tastes delicious, it is actually a catastrophe of nature. It has been bred unnaturally. And it cannot produce more fruit. And so if the world just decided that all we like is seedless watermelon, and we just demand more and more and more seedless watermelon, pretty soon our demand and consumption will wipe all watermelon off the face of the earth, save for the people who were smart enough to see it coming, and they started hiding watermelons in their backyard. Amen?